The Infinity 2x2, the puzzle intended to make a mockery of the customization arms race, where companies make complicated adjustment systems, sometimes difficult to read, and then they go and brag about their 1,000 possible combinations. And here you have infinity magnet strength options, and all you need to do to adjust the magnet strength is to turn one screw. How this works is when you loosen the screw or tighten the screw, the height of this thing will change. There's a spring underneath this like blue hexagonal piece, so it will always be pushed upwards to be flush against the screw. So when you tighten it, this piece goes down and these magnets will get closer to the surrounding pieces, and therefore the attraction is stronger. And when you loosen the screw, this piece will go up, and therefore it's further away from the corners and the magnet strength is weaker. And this is further compounded by the fact of how the 2x2 alignment mechanism works, because even cubes are odd cubes with hidden middle layers, and you must have a way to prevent the piece from, like the middle layer from coming out of alignment. But for 2x2, you can pretty much glue one block. There's no slice layer here. To bring the block here, you pretty much have 3 axes that can turn around the block. And if you have noticed, every piece in this cube interacts with the block. So by having this piece right here to be inside that bandage block, when you adjust the magnet strength of this one piece alone, you actually adjust the magnet strength of every interaction on the cube. So there is no need for 8 corners with adjustable magnets, you only need 1. And unfortunately, while the theory behind this cube is cool, the reality is just very limited by what my 3D printer can do, and this is actually not my first attempt at making this cube. I had an earlier attempt printed in entirely black PLA. This version is stickerless, and the corners outside are printed in 6 different colors of PLA, but the internals are printed in PETG, which is a higher quality material. And the reason why I even made 2 was I was actually very dissatisfied with the quality of the first version. It had a few mistakes in the design, and it had a few thin parts that I think one of them broke also. And unfortunately, even with the new one, the quality is not much better, but it's a bit better. And I did not finish the original because I didn't want to waste magnets by gluing them into such a horrible alternate puzzle. Therefore, this puzzle is technically was built with the mechanism of an Infinity 2x2, but it actually didn't have infinity magnet adjustment settings because it didn't even have magnets. Whereas at least with this one, I finished the cube and it actually does contain magnets. And also due to the fact that this cube is 3D printed, there are a handful of design compromises, most noticeably in the cap that goes over the corner. I actually wanted to design this like a normal center cap where it fits exactly and it goes in and out by friction. However, because I don't trust the accuracy of my 3D printer, in fact there's a very high risk of printing something that's slightly too big that can't fit, and repeated use over time would wear it down too fast to the point where the cap would easily fall out. So I just wanted to design something that would never fall out, and this design is inspired by the Ultron WRM, like how the cap has more like torpedo-like hooks to hook it underneath the neighboring pieces. And another problem was I actually couldn't exactly fit the cap on top, which wouldn't have been a problem with the friction sliding on design, but because like these parts actually collide with the arms of this hexagonal piece, so because of that I had to shorten the tip of every piece and make the magnet further away, which weakens the magnet overall. So ideally, if I could perfectly design this cube, I would have actually stuck this thing much further out and made the adjustable magnet strength much more noticeable. The second version is intentionally very simple and blocky to allow as little room as possible to screw up. The center pieces are modeled after the original Fog 3, and the cube has a stockless floating center. But otherwise, it's just made to have as few cut lines as possible and as straight of a cut line as possible, so that it's easier to sand faces down once you're done 3D printing, and there's also lesser room for a mistake somewhere to occur. The theoretical full version of this cube is intended to have infinity spring compression settings as well, true triple infinity of elasticity, spring strength, and magnet strength. So back in the original video where I showcased the V1, I did mention changing the GTS 3 gear system into something that fits more like a bottle cap instead of having a gear compressor. But then one thing I did think about is the spring will just push the whole bottle cap down to its minimum setting, and that would defeat the purpose of adjustment. However, ever since designing the V2, I did think of an alternative elasticity system And that is just to flip the GTS3 system upside down, like both literally and functionally. So under normal circumstances, when you tighten the screw, you are increasing the spring force because you squash the spring, and you're also decreasing the elasticity because now the height at which you can raise the piece of the cube is lower. However, with the GTS3, turning this spring compressor would allow you to increase only the spring force, which actually makes it possible to change only elasticity if you can turn the gear compressor up and then back out the screw by the same amount, and this pretty much compresses the spring back to its original setting. But with this system here, the spring is below this piece and it pushes this piece upwards against the screw. Then this piece is the elasticity limiter. So the blue piece is more or less pushed to the highest height on the screw, and it doesn't really move unless you change the screw height. But then the orange piece it can be screwed higher or lower, and when you screw it lower, it gets nearer the centerpiece and it limits how high the centerpiece can rise. So this is basically an elasticity limiter, and it doesn't affect spring force because the spring is only pushing against the blue piece. You can actually adjust both spring force and elasticity independent of each other because, like I said, the orange piece takes care of elasticity, and in order to change spring force, you back out the screw and then you tighten the orange piece down by the same amount. So the height at which the centerpiece can rise doesn't change, but the spring becomes less compressed. So it would be interesting to see what mass production can do to this idea. I think this concept does set up for an amazing 2x2, and it proves that you don't need complicated over-engineered systems to make your cube more customizable. I think that at bare minimum, the GTS3's gear system plus your fundamental spring and screw, they can go a long way.